Hey folks, welcome to today's creation, and that is a witch's ladder. Some of you may be very familiar with these, others may not. So before we jump in, I wanted to start with a very brief insight into documentation of the witch's ladder. This isn't necessarily difficult to find, but again, in terms of how much of this is documented over the years, it really doesn't feel like there's a lot out there, and many of the sources seem to be far more modern. As I understand it, in around 1887, an article appeared in the folklore journal titled "A Witch's Ladder," and this was by antiquarian 𝗪𝗻𝗁. And also, I believe investigating with him was someone called 𝗬𝗁𝗂𝗏. This piece was discovered in a Somerset attic alongside brooms and an old chair. This particular witch's ladder is viewable in Pitt River's museum. So hanging in the magic and witchcraft case at 1.5 meters long, made from string with a loop at one end and cock feathers inserted along its length. If you are familiar with the witch's ladder, you've probably seen the journal picture or the picture from the Witchcraft Museum. Other than this, there are links made to witches' garlands, other braided creations from different countries and cultures. However, in honesty, as I say, gathering this was a little bit of a challenge based on variance from source to source. So the history of present-day practice could be largely linked to this Somerset find, or it means that we just don't know about anything else that was found, handed down by oral tradition, etc. Either way, I think that information varies from witch to witch and place to place as to the reasons behind these creations, their inclusions, even how many knots there are. And while I'm not going to go into any more history around that, or at least lore that I've been able to find, I will tell you why I made my specific decisions, and we're going to get into viewing the process of what I created. Now, to get this started, we want to gather all of the items that we plan on including in our witch's ladder. And I love the idea of witch's ladders, by the way, because not only does it pull on the charm creation, but also knot magic, weaving, sometimes braiding, the inclusion of talismans, anything else that you want to utilize as a correspondence and draw into this creation. It could be a specific focus on the animal aspect as well if you're going to use that layer. This isn't everything that I'm using, but I just really wanted to give you some examples of some of the things that you might have accessible to you and give you an overall sense of this before we jump into mine. I kept mine quite simple, and I did definitely want to use the inclusion of my pigeon feathers, which I've had put aside for this very reason for a long time. So what I use is my pigeon feathers, a guinea fowl feather, a local pine cone, a piece of fallen branch, and some lavender. You can see me going through my feathers and just kind of trying to ascertain which ones that I'll use. To be honest, one of the things that I wanted to do in this particular video was ensure that you could see any struggles I had, any mistakes or changes that I made. They're all very small, but it's quite a fiddly little process, and whilst it is edited, a lot of the editing is to do with time and the breaks and lost content in filming from people calling me or my phone running out of memory. So there's that, but I wanted to give you a really authentic view, and my feathers will change throughout. You may slightly notice this. And now what I'm doing is lining everything up in preparation. For those who are wondering, my charm is that of protection in an overall sense, but more specifically to integrate, thank and honour the land spirits, house spirits, welcoming the fae that I actively work with at least, and anything else residing here, essentially an extension of the spirit work I've been undertaking more actively lately, and trying to be with them rather than solely focused on protective spells that may prohibit or banish things that I may not intend to. All I've done here next is measure out the cord, and I did 2.5 times the length, and to be honest, it was still a little bit of a tight finish. Then I'm adding a loop in because I wanted a way to hang it. I did do the loop as a different type of knot, however, because I wanted to differentiate between the two. Now we get into beginning with it, and it's the first knot. One of the other reasons that I left some of these mistakes in, by the way, other than the reality of it, is to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that you might come up against. When you first start, at least for me, there's a lot of string, cord, twine. There's a lot to contend with. That's why I found it so fiddly. And you can see that for me, I'm someone who personally struggles with my hand-eye coordination anyway. I was very pleased with how it came out. The lavender that I chose to add is a piece from my parents' garden. As you can see, I'm doing a double knot. I have no idea of what name it is, but these are the knots that I went for. And I'm pulling it towards me because what you can't see and hear is I'm now breathing onto my knot and also ushering some private words, activating the protection. It's just a part of my knot magic working anyway. I really wanted to include that in this. Here's where you start to see changes. I changed the direction of the feathers. I changed some of the feathers throughout. It's purely just an aesthetic thing, the way that I wanted it to hang. I do split the feathers before I put the knots around them in the middle. I found that that helped me with placement, but it's not a necessity. And some people don't knot their feathers in the middle, they just do it at the very ends. I suppose if you're ever going to dismantle it, then it means that it doesn't impact the feather so much. This is not something I'm going to dismantle, so I'm okay with it. And once you've done one, then it's basically just a rinse and repeat process, as they say, with a lot of fiddling and a few adjustments, a few accidents and changes along the way. I suppose one other thing that may be noteworthy is for my particular ladder, I just descend down it, doing 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. I have seen other ladder creations where the people have split that out and maybe done number 1, number 3, then gone back to do number 2. I can't remember their reasoning behind that, but this seemed the easiest way to me. And as you can see now, I am showing you some progression. Next, we're probably going to speed it up a little bit more because it's much of the same. I thought as you watched me repeat until I get to the end, I would talk about my reason for choosing 9 knots. While 9 is a common choice, at least it seems that way, my reason is not for the same as others. 3, 8, 9 and 13 are my kind of go-to numerical choices in the craft for varying reasons. 9 is one that I've been fond of for some time. Also, fun fact, my stepmum really loves the number 9 too. I have it show up frequently alongside 8 within my birth date. I enjoy working with 3s as well, not because of the rule of 3, but more of a natural draw to this. I don't tend to overanalyze these things, but really 9 is just one of the numbers that I work with, and as I say, 3s. Finally, 9 comes up a lot in Norse mythology, such as the 9 worlds. Norse mythos is something I've studied and worked with for a good several years now, as an exciting nod to one of the only bloodlines I can confirm alongside British. Also my work with the Futhark runes and my dedication to 𝗺. 9 just felt like the right choice. I knew that I wanted to have 9 feathers and 9 of the key knots. However, because I wanted the inclusion at the end, I decided to join 2 of the feathers together. This way I retained the 9 feathers, but I also was able to utilise the 9 specific knots, and the 9th was of course for my pine cone edition. You may have noticed it was quite the struggle getting the pine cone and stick attached, but I did manage it and they're very secure. So now that it's nice and finished, I'm going to show you where I hung it and what it looks like. I hung it in my witchy room, of course, on my bookcase. I really like the angles of the feathers. It feels like a really energetic presence. I spent a lot of time creating this. Of course, this video is sped up quite significantly to save you some time. So yeah, I have really enjoyed the process actually. There you have it. That is my witch's ladder. This one, as I say, was a very simple creation, but of course you can be as creative as you wish. I hope you enjoyed coming along with me, because rather than doing a prescriptive, do it this way kind of video, I prefer to invite you into my craft and then hopefully offer some guidance or some insights, but really encourage you to do your own thing. And finally, to finish this video off, as I've been spending a lot of time looking into witches' ladders, I was looking at different ways that people may speak the charms into being in the process of moving through the knotwork. And if you don't really like my approach, but feel like you're in need of some inspiration, there are quite a few charm poetries, rites, whichever word you prefer, that are written by others that you can use. I found quite a lot on the internet, but my favourite was actually from Folk Witchcraft, which is by Roger J. Horne. I've been spending a lot of time with this book for Joanna's book club. The Witch's Ladder offering that he has in there, I found it particularly lovely. I didn't see it until after I did mine actually, but it's definitely something that I would enjoy. In this, there's a gap to put the focus of whatever it is that your ladder is meant to be calling in, and therefore I'm going to say protection, but you could replace this with whatever. He says make them your own. This isn't a be-all and end-all. His offering is, I tie this knot for my need of protection. The next I tie in the devil's name. The 3rd to fix it by my will, the 4th one to hold it fast and firm, the 5th one to bind it evermore, the 6th fastens the wish herein, the 7th brings it nearer still, the 8th makes it almost true, the 9th completes the ladder by which I climb and reach for protection. I thought that that was a really lovely way to end and give you another idea of making the process feel really ritualistic and speaking into it in a way that works for you. Some people might want to change out the word devil. You can really play with it. There's a lot of creations online, as I say, and you're in luck if you're doing 9 knots in particular. Or you could simply make your own or not do that part of the process. But anyway, I wanted to add it. I really enjoyed it. I'd love to hear from you whether this inspired you to make one, whether you've already used them in your practices for a long time or something very similar. Other than that, I will see you next month for new content. Thank you for hanging out with me.